Me first?
Yeah, you can open. It's your day. I sent him an email asking if he was planning on coming, and I did not get a response. But Heather said he was meeting with Charter Review Committee at 6, I think, today. So if he was meeting with them, I would hope that he'd be able to come to this. Right. Oh yeah. He would have to be here by Zoom as well. I think they do have a Zoom open. Heather is Kirk. Okay. No, I have not met with them yet. They have not called upon me yet.
Good evening. This is a joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Select Board. It is a little bit after 7 p.m. We are at the Public Safety Complex at 576 Pleasant Street in Paxton in the training room. On behalf of the Finance Committee, we're a member of 7, 4 is a quorum. I declare we have 6 in attendance, 4 in person, 2 online. So we would officially open the Finance Committee portion of the meeting.
Great, thank you. Julia Pinjatori, Town of Paxton Select Board. I am going to also open our Select Board meeting for tonight, Wednesday, March 12th, 2025, 7:07 by the wall clock, 7:04 by my clock. Thank you.
So I think by virtue of either coin toss or rock, paper, scissors, Bay Path has chosen to go first, and Jeff Wenzel, who's a member of our particular committee and a member of the Bay Path Folk School Committee. Jeff, you want to introduce our presenters?
Yes, happy to do it. So we've got Kyle Brenner, our superintendent, and Cindy Schofield, business manager, here to give us a brief overview of our upcoming budget for Bay Path. So thanks very much for taking the ride out.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Wetzel. As I said, our school committee rep from the town of Paxton, and we also have Peter Shore, the other rep from the town of Paxton. And again, I'm Kyle Brenner, the proud superintendent of Bay Path Regional Vocational Technical High School, and new business manager Cindy Schofield is here with us tonight to help answer any questions that I might get stuck on. So without any further ado, we're presenting the FY26 proposed budget. Down arrow didn't work. So our funding sources. Chapter 70 and Chapter 71 estimates are based on governor's budget that was submitted January 2025. Our estimated Chapter 70 funding for FY26 is $14,565,806. Our estimated Chapter 71 funding for FY 2026 is $1,375,375. These are preliminary estimates subject to change as the House and Senate deliberate on the budget. It worked the first one. Oh. So the impact on Bay Path is shown on this. You can see the FY26 and the FY25. Our Chapter 70 has an increase of $112,194. Our minimum contributions has an increase overall of $388,016. And our required net school spending has gone up $500,210 on those. And you can see the total amounts for FY26 there. And the financial information. So as I said, FY26 total budget for assessment is $30,298,721. Our member towns assessments are at the minimum. Our budget includes a debt service assessment of $1,552,003, and our operational budget does not require municipal funds above the minimum contributions by our member communities. Our member assessments total is $13,665,798. Our financial information, although assessments are at the minimum, it's important to note that the required minimum contributions that each town must contribute have increased collectively by $388,016. Our member towns' transportation assessment has increased by $345,176 due to a decrease in the use of regional transportation reimbursement funds this year. The district has allocated $260,531 of our E&D funds to partially offset that higher increase. Our total Chapter 70 revenue is $14,565,806. Our school choice assessment is $293,789 that we pay for students who have school choiced out of Bay Path. Chapter 71 busing aid is $1,375,375. We are going to use again, as we have historically, $75,000 from our excess and deficiency fund to continue to fund down our OPEB liability. In fiscal year '24, the district missed its net school spending requirement by $660,595. The FY26 budget contains an appropriation of $500,000 from E&D to reduce that shortfall. And this is the FY26 budget summary. You can see all the allocations here. Our operational budget, Chapter 78 is $14,565,806. Our school choice assessment is a reduction of $293,789. Our assessment minimum contributions is $11,613,795. There's no assessment above the minimum. We are reporting a fiscal 26 interest earnings of $150,000. Our E&D OPEB transfer is $75,000, and our E&D to close that net school spending gap from the previous year is $500,000 for a total operational budget of $26,610,812. Our transportation budget total is $2,135,906. Our Chapter 71 aid is $1,375,375. We have taken $260,531 to offset that and reduce it down to a transportation reimbursement fund is $500,000 on that. Our debt service, you can see the principal is higher than the interest, and that'll continue to go down for debt service total of $1,552,003. There's no buy-in assessment, no sewer betterment fee this year in our FY 2026. Budget for assessments is $30,298,721. The school choice again is $293,789, so our total operating budget is $30,592,510. Our budget highlights. The FY26 includes the addition of a new diesel vocational program with 2 instructors. We're adding 10 part-time student summer positions. These are minimum wage jobs for our students to help out. They're typically going to be from our construction trades, building, property maintenance, as well as our carpentry and electrical positions to help with things that can't get done with our normal custodial staff. They do a phenomenal job, but these are the little things that you wish you could get to but can't. Our students gives an opportunity for them to apply their trades in service to our school and receive minimum wage on that. We're adding a vocational instructional coach. Last year, we added an academic instructional coach, and it's been working very well. So we're going to give the same resource to our vocational teachers to help them out in the classroom. We're going to add a health dental vocational aide that will be primarily in our dental program, but available to help out in our health program if needed. It includes contractual wage increases for all our employees. And our health insurance, we're reporting an 18% increase this year. That's a significant increase. It is industry standard from the research that we have done. We haven't had an increase in health for the last 6+ years, with 1 year actually given a reimbursement. This year, with our health insurance group, there's been a significant increase on that. It has been talked about going forward that in those good years, rather than not passing along an increase, doing a modest increase so that we don't face such a high increase. But talking to some of our peers and colleagues, they're seeing 21, 22% increases in healthcare this year. But 18 is a big jump for us. We continue to use our SOA funds to provide significant professional development to all our staff, especially programs focused on the social and emotional issues of our students. And we'll use those funds to provide programs such as to fund speakers to the students to address issues of bullying, bias, mental health, and more. The budget includes supply and material accounts funded to account for the continued inflation and unfortunate tariffs that we'll be seeing. Several highlighted shop equipment, big ads. Our culinary arts will be getting a steaming oven. Building and property will get a landscape utility vehicle. Our HVAC refrigeration students, we're going to update all the student workstations. They've served their useful life, and we'll be replacing all of those. And our automotive collision will get a brand new frame straightening machine. Our freshman seat allocation, you can see for next year, is based off the school-age student population in each one of our 10 towns. You can see that Paxton has a total of 701 school-age children. That is 3.96% of the total school-age children for our 10-town communities of 17,695. So that equates to 13 of the 330 seats we have available. That's an increase of 5 additional students coming in. Typically, we hang around 325. We're slowly increasing that because of the new diesel technology program that we have on that. So we'll increase that slowly over the next 4 years. Foundation enrollment is the total number of students in grades 9 through 12 for each one of the towns. And you can see last year's numbers as well as FY26. FY26, we're projected to have 1,236 students. Paxton has a total of 42 students for FY26. That's 2 additional students over the previous year on that, which equates to a 5% change overall. And the statement of assessments for each one of our 10 towns. You can see all of our 10 towns on the left column. The minimum contributions on that, you can see that of the 11,613,795 minimum contribution, Paxton's portion is $574,499. The transportation assessment, total of $500,000 to our 10 towns. Paxton's portion is $16,990. And the debt service, Paxton's portion is $61,484,000 for a total assessment to the town of Paxton of $652,973. This chart shows it broken out in year over year for FY26 over FY25. You can see the minimum contribution went up $47,351, or almost a 9% increase on that. There's no assessment above the minimum. Transportation costs did go up $12,008. That's a 241% increase. Again, that's because of the use of the transportation reimbursement fund was significantly reduced going into this year. Our debt service is a reduction of $1,394 for a total assessment of $652,973, or a $57,965 increase. And again, these are the grand totals for our 10 towns. And I thank you for your continued support of our Bay Path students, and we're prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Kyle, can I take you to page 19?
Sure. Yep.
Couple of good points to point out, but also something I think to highlight. The overall increase for Paxton is $57,965. which on the scheme of your whole budget, and to that matter, our budget is not that much, but on the right-hand column, the minimum local contribution is up almost 9%. Transportation, only $12,000, but percentage-wise is up 241%. And the overall assessment is 274, as all of which have been mandated to you and by extension to us by the state.
Exactly.
Has the state ever heard of Proposition 2.5?
I believe they have.
You knew what I was going to ask. It just seems to be out of sync. Again, I think we can find $57,000, but it's the principle of the matter that over 7.5% of that is going to be passed on to us to find a way in our own operating budget to subsidize this. And you've been good enough, as the slides state, not to have any increase other than that. So again, it's mandated to you and passed on to us. Is there anything that can be said or done or action be taken regarding that? Not to change it, but I mean to go forward, because we're lucking out this year that it's 57,000, but some year if it's 157,000, we have a serious problem.
I'm not quite sure what to offer on that. I can just tell you that we're ever conscious of that, and we've been fortunate ever since before I've gotten there, that our school hasn't gone above minimum local contribution. Each year that I've presented, we've never asked our towns for a contribution above the minimum assessment, and we're ever conscious of, if we don't hit net school spending, we return that money back or we use it in creative ways to offset. We've historically contributed at least $500,000 to the transportation reimbursement to reduce that this year. Because the assessment costs, and I'm looking, came in higher last year, we don't have such a large reserve in the reimbursement fund to come down, so that's why you saw a significant increase on that. And these numbers aren't final. The transportation numbers we hope will come in, and as this makes its way through, I know and our colleagues here can share that MASB and MASS all that have done joint letters to address the shortfall in the budgeting for public schools on the state. So hopefully through this House Ways and Means and the Senate, that they hear the complaints of the schools, and how do we continue to fund this without a larger portion of the millionaires tax going towards, that's what it's created for. So how do we offset those? Cost of educating has gone up. Inflation has gone up. The tariffs are going to hit us. A lot of different things on that. But we lobby with our Mass Association of School Superintendents and the Mass Association of School Business Officials, as well as the Mass Association of School Committees. So I know they're at the tables and lobbying every day that this gets up in front of the House or the Senate on that. So we'll continue to do that. Even we're sending it, even though we see that we're funded and we're not looking for more, because it's coming. There's a financial cliff that's coming. But I can just say that and I look at Cindy, we're ever conscious, and we're looking at ways that we can, operate and provide the services and opportunities to our students without asking our towns to go over the minimum local contribution.
Can I ask one more question? Do you mind? Kyle, 3-4 days, I'm not sure, there was a very good article in the Telegram and Gazette. You had 15 minutes of fame, then we're going to give you 15 more. The article was outstanding in terms of applications, double, triple, quadruple what you can take in. Mm-hmm. Huge focus, huge shift to the trades and the like. But the article also came away with a bad side to that. And I'm wondering if you can comment on that. Because Bay Path was featured, Monty Tech and Fitchburg were featured, those were the only two. Can you add anything to that article in terms of not only the good side, but what was the bad side of communities maybe being reluctant to have students go to the trade school?
Sure, it comes down to budget. We know that money follows students, so the more students that, come to Bay Path, the money follows those. The Chapter 70 and the Chapter 74 money comes to Bay Path on those, which reduces, with a declining school-age children population, is a declining enrollment in our sending communities, so it's, it's that, catch-22. Vocational schools across the state are doing extremely well. We meet the needs of all our students, and we're preparing them not only for careers, but if that career requires a college degree, they're prepared to go to college. They have the tools that they can go, so they make that decision. Not that I don't have the tools to go to college, so I have to go to work. That comes from ed reform when MCAS came out, and they said, hey, these are the standards all public high schools have to meet. And at the time, vocational said, we're preparing kids for the jobs. What do we care about, academics? And they said, you're a public school, you have to do it. I can talk to the efforts that the school I was in put forward to put relevance and rigor into our academics so that the students see the need for math and science and English, that they use it every day in their trades. I don't know a carpenter who can't add and subtract fractions every day they're on the job. I don't know a plumber who can't figure out the slope of a pipe and the circumference for the gallons per minute that they need, or a cosmetologist who doesn't know chemistry when they're putting the perm set solutions in. We stepped it up, and the students met the challenge, and because they met the challenge, our graduation rates went up to 98, in our school, 98% four-year graduation rate with a 1% dropout rate. Our chronic absentee goes down because the students want to be there, and they want to learn, and they want to be in their shops. So we met the challenge on all of those, and because of that, students wanted to come. My previous school had a wait list of over 400. This school, for the past 5 years, has close to 300-400 students on a wait list on it. It's not about not allowing students to go to the vocational school, because Paxton and the other 9 communities signed on to Bay Path to be the vocational alternative for your students who want that. They have a right to come to our school and experience and get the skills and competency they need to be successful, whether they go on to higher education, go into the world of work, or join the military. Those are the 3 successes that we count as a win if our students go into. So we measure at graduation how many students are going on to that. We have to meet a minimum standard because we take federal money from the Career and Tech Ed. It's called the Perkins Grant, so we have to measure every one of our programs on placements at time of graduation and 1-year follow-up. So we follow up a year later and say, hey, are you still going to school? Are you still employed? Are you still in the military on that? So it's about accountability, and we're accountable for every one of those students, and it's our obligation to meet their needs. We have over 300 business industry advisors that come in and help us and look at our curriculum and tell us where we should go and what we should do. Our students may go on to college, and that's not us not doing our job. Many of those students are going on to college to become an engineer in the trade that they are. So advanced manufacturing student who can do the CNC lathe will go on to become a mechanical engineer. And more importantly, and this happens every day, and there's no measure or metric to measure this, those students are going to that school and working. So they're going to graduate in 4 years debt-free. And they're using the skills that they learned in their trade, as well as the academics that we established in our schools on it. It's a tough situation to be in, because I feel for our colleagues who are seeing declining populations and declining enrollment. The money's not going to follow them. There's a unique way, if you read the article, of what Monty Tech did. Right now we're at capacity. We can't add. We were fortunate to merge 2 programs into one, a business program and a marketing program. Is a business entrepreneur and marketing program called BEAM. That created a space by merging those two programs together, that allowed us to seek funding, and that's the other thing we did. We went out and saw a capital skills lab and modernization grant to the tune of just over $700,000 to allow us to convert our students, and we're fortunate with that. We're not going out to a contractor and saying we need to change this. Our students from electrical and plumbing, as well as IT and carpentry, are going in and renovating that space into a state-of-the-art IT room, and where they vacate IT are in an old small engine repair shop that lends itself to the proper air ventilation and drains we need to bring our diesel program into that. And we're going to put hundreds of thousands of dollars of state-of-the-art diesel equipment in there to prepare our students. A top-rated diesel tech, master certified tech, is making six figures. I know a parts person in a diesel company that's making $75,000 a year. And I know several companies, because they're on our advisory boards, who will hire these students as soon as they hit the minimum competencies. So that means as early as the second half of their junior year. Rather than come to school, they go to work, and they're put into work and often making $20 an hour. And then they come back for their academics the following week, and I can proudly say that they're hiring the students upon graduation, and they're going right out into the world of work, and now they're paying them to get the advanced certifications to become a master certified diesel tech on that. So I spewed a lot out at you. Like I said, I'm the proud superintendent of Bay Path Regional. The thing I was saying is we can't expand beyond this diesel program. Monty Tech went after a lab modernization grant and bought a vacant warehouse that they converted to a lab for construction programs. It's a great partnership because three of their communities, I'm not going to name them because I don't want to get one of them wrong, three of their communities committed to providing students every other week to go to Monty just for the vocational, and then the other week they go back to their home school. So those towns keep the Chapter 70, and only the 74 money goes to Monty for the tools and equipment and supplies. So now we're not stealing kids, we're not reducing the population. They do what they do best and get the academics, and they come over and we do what we do best and provide them with the carpentry skills, the electrical skills, and the plumbing skills out at Monty Tech. We're in initial talks with some area organizations about what space is available, and maybe seeking one of those grants to provide students from the sending communities who didn't get in the opportunity to get the vocational training and stay within their schools. Mm-hmm. So more to come on that. We're very initial talks, but we're really excited about looking at how we can expand those and work with our sending communities, not the foes. So.
Kyle, you may have bought all the papers, but do you happen to remember the date that it was, the article appeared in the TNG, just so we can refer our audience to it?
Monday, I
Monday?
believe.
Was it? Yeah, it was Monday, exactly. Yeah.
Monday in the TNG.
Yeah.
Yep. Monday is a great article about vocational education. Statewide, depends what number you look at, there's 8,000 to 11,000 students on wait list to get into the regional vocational schools. And the state has committed $75 million to expand seats and in comprehensive schools as well as regional vocational schools.
Well said.
Yeah. So I had a question about the E&D funds that are being infused into the budget. There are, it looks like, close to $1 million being added to the budget this year, $835,000 by my quick addition. Is that sustainable?
Perfect addition. Is it sustainable? If we had a crystal ball, like I said, there's a financial cliff that some of our colleagues are facing, and we're usually not too far behind on that. We are staying at our minimum contributions. We didn't make net school spending, so we're able to take that extra and put it into E&D. It will always do that, and the cap on that is 5%, right? 5% of our total operating budget. So we reduced that down. Like I said, transportation was 260,531, OPEB 75, and FY '26 reduction 500,000. So you're right, 835. And FY '25 we used 500 there as well, for a total of 1,335,000, just over that we're infusing into the budget on that. So I think there's roughly 700,000 left in that. So we have to be conscious about, where we fall at the end of this year and how much will go into E&D, so we don't exceed that 5% on that. So where we can, we will always put it back into the budget and try to offset that. And if we go over, we return that to the towns.
Okay, great. No, I wanted to make sure that the E&D fund wasn't getting depleted as a result. It doesn't sound like that's the case.
No, not yet.
Okay, good.
That's not our intent to deplete that. It's always good to have a rainy day fund. Some of the things, like setting up that transportation reimbursement account, helps us keep within the bounds of the 5% on it. And, our fields, this time last year I told you our fields haven't had any reconstruction to them, and that's 50 years old, and they're due. We haven't come to the town. The initial estimates are $9 million on that. Nobody has an appetite to take on that. So we're doing unique things and looking to install an irrigation system to give our fields some time to regenerate over the summer and reduce rental of those fields on that. But there's going to be a need, and we're looking at maybe what we can do for capital improvement type stabilization fund on that, so that we can build up and save, and maybe when we come, the ask won't be as big as a flat out, we have no money, we're asking you all to fund the total bill on that. So we're ever looking at that, and how to work fiscally responsible with, it's a big challenge. You entrust us with your students, and you entrust us with significant funding, and we're working diligently to spend that money wisely and provide our students with incredible opportunities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further questions.
Questions here?
No further questions from the Finance Committee? Kyle, thank you very much. We
With that, thank
appreciate
you
it.
again.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate
Thank
your
you.
support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Hey guys, it's good to see you in person. We should also thank the generosity of our partners from Wachusett to let Kyle go first.
Yes, thank you.
The Mountaineer spirit.
Good stuff.
You got it.
Jim, why don't you need no introduction, but why don't you introduce yourself and Michelle at the same time?
Sounds great. Good evening, everybody. We appreciate the opportunity to present the Wachusett Regional School District budget. I'm here with Michelle Grisey, who's our Business and Finance Director extraordinaire.
Can everybody hear Jim? Yes?
Okay.
We good?
Did Scott say something about the sound?
He says he's good.
He
Oh,
did.
okay.
I think he's okay. Am I being amplified up here? Can you hear me okay?
Thanks. I have to push one more button, Jim. I was so good, but I forgot to hit the share screen button.
I saw it.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're good now.
So once again, hello, I'm Jim Riley, Superintendent of the Wachusett Regional School District, and I'm here with Michelle Grisey, who's our Business and Finance Director.
Still the same. He's just got a quiet voice, I think.
It was actually better before the mic was down, yeah.
We okay now? I think it might be off.
I think he's just
Is the green light on the mic? On the base of the microphone? Yeah. I wonder if we can just, there is
not
a,
very loud.
there is a speaker in here, a monitor, it's somewhere, maybe we can increase that.
He's pushing buttons. Otherwise, just yell. Pretend like you're mad at me and yell.
Oh,
I'm sure it's not that hard.
A background in teaching, you should be able to project, right?
it should be. Want me just to begin? Actually, it's on now.
There we
so.
go.
There we go,
roll.
sounds good.
So
Yep.
for the third time, I just want to say I'm very honored to be here. Jim Riley, Superintendent of Wachusett Regional School District, and I'm here with Michelle Grisey, who's our Business and Finance Director. But really happy to talk to you about our budget and answer any questions that people may have as a follow-up.
No, he's good. I gave him control.
And so just quickly, what we're hoping to go over with you today is talk about some of the progress we've made in the district over the last 2.5 years, give you an update on what our FY25 budget has been and what we've accomplished in the school, specifically with the Paxton Center School, talk about our FY26 budget development process, share our FY26 proposed budget, share some of our capital improvement and requests, and then also talk about next steps in the budget process. So one of the first things I would want to share with this, we've had a busy 2.5 years, and we've accomplished some things that I think were very important for the district. My first year here, we had shared that we had unfortunately, a multitude of financial issues that had been inherited. And one of the things that, one of the greatest things, honestly, that's happened for me since I've been in the district is we were able to hire Michelle. And she has done an extraordinary job bringing our financial reporting up to date. We're fully up to date with all of our reporting. And really, I've said this before, and I really do mean it, I would compare our financials to any school district or really any of our towns at this point. I'm that confident in the numbers that we'll share with you tonight and the work that stands behind it. But we've done some other things as well. We've completed a strategic plan, and so with stakeholders created a vision of where the district could be, where we ultimately want to provide for our students, and making sure they have a holistic but academically appropriate education. We've created a town growth task force, and what that is looking at the 10-year population trends in all 5 towns and making sure we're properly provisioned in all of our schools, so we're prepared for growth, and in some cases, if there's a decline in population, that we're able to handle that. We are, for the first time, really, probably in the last 5, 6, 7 years, making sure that we're adjusting our class sizes. That was a policy that was in effect for school committee, but it wasn't always being followed. And when I share some of the work that's happened at Paxton Center School this year, one of the things you'll note is we added 3 teachers at the Paxton Center School this year. And so I think that makes a difference, and it really had helped us avoid class sizes of up to 27 at the school. The other thing we're doing is working on high-quality curriculums. I'm going to share our data in a minute, and our data is a huge driving force for improvements we know we need to make in the district. But at the K-8 level, so specifically at Paxton Center School, they have a new ELA program. They have a new math curriculum. We have a new science curriculum for the 6th through 8th grade. We're using a program called Project Lead the Way, which is more of an interactive, science-based STEAM curriculum. And then we also have updated our U.S. history courses at the high school level. I share all that because I think it is one of the needs the district's had to have high-quality instructional materials. And one of the good things about this initiative is that a lot of it has been done budget neutral through the supported grants. We've negotiated new contracts with 7 bargaining units, and this will be the final year of the majority of our contracts next year. At least they'll be sunsetting the ones that we negotiated my first year, but we are proud of the contracts that we've negotiated. Teacher's contract will be in the final year, but that contract was 2%, 2.25% and is 2.75% next year, but it also accounts for an additional workday for teachers, an additional professional development day. We've worked very hard to have budget-neutral reallocation of our staff. When I get to the moment when I share some of the positions that were added at Paxton, that was done in a budget-neutral way. We ended up looking at positions at the high school and at some other levels that we no longer needed, and so we took those positions, and then they funded the positions at Paxton Center where we really did need them based on class sizes. And we've done that in a number of areas over the last 2.5 years. Lastly, at the high school, we're working on our programming. We heard tonight, and I would agree, the vocational educational model is a good one. And a lot of times kids see the natural application of what they're learning in school, and it gives their learning more meaning. They understand why math's important. They understand, some of the skills that they'll learn in the other content areas. And that can be very powerful for them in learning. And we are trying to provide additional opportunities for the students who come to school with us. Right now, the programs we're working on in engineering, health services, criminal justice, banking we have, and finance. And so it is one of the things that we're trying to be mindful of, so kids have an option where if they don't perhaps get into a Bay Path, or they have interests in other areas that that school offers, they'll have options when they come to Wachusett. And I think that's an important piece of the work we're doing. We're also expanding our opportunity for internships, because again, I think to be able to apply learning and for students to be able to practice what they think they're interested in as they move forward, these can be powerful opportunities for kids and make their learning more vibrant and meaningful to them. And then lastly, we have dual enrollment and then also early college programs that we've expanded. And effectively what that means is students can earn college credits while attending Wachusett High School. And that has the benefit of decreasing the cost of education for a lot of families, but then it also has the added benefit of sometimes kids who may not have been considering college have the opportunity to take a college course and maybe reconsider whether or not that's something they're interested in. And I think that's very powerful, because a lot of times they may think that they can't access college or they can't afford it, but it gets them in line with some of these local programs, and they start to maybe think that is an option that could work for them moving forward. And then the last thing I'd share about the work we've been doing in the district for the last 2.5 years is we've become far more data informed. I mean, one of the things you'll see in this presentation is we really try to draw back almost everything we'll talk to you about tonight to data. And it was a weak spot in the district, and I think we didn't look at it enough, and we really need to improve our ability to do that. We shouldn't be doing things in education that aren't research-based and data-informed, and so we've really tried to take some steps to make sure that's a practice we're applying across the district, not only at the district level, but also in our classrooms and how we support students. So I wanted to share a little bit of a budget update for us. I'm going to try to sorry, those were looking a little strange. And so one of the things I think we feel particularly good about is our first 2 years when we came and spoke to you, we still had some major appropriation lines that needed to be adjusted. Last year specifically, I think you probably remember us talking about our special education out of district tuition, which was out of whack. I think we're finally in a place where we have a very high level of confidence in what we've appropriated. And we're able to do actually at this point timely transfers. Janet Brennan, who's our business and finance subcommittee chair, is with us tonight, and one of the things she's helped work us with is making sure we're timely reporting where we are live monthly basis, where our balances are, and if we need to move money between appropriations, we're doing that transparently with school committee approval, and we're actually at the point where we're making sure we're doing it on a timeline and not waiting until the end of the year. And so that's important for a couple of reasons. One, for transparency. If things are happening in one of our appropriations, it's important to share that with the public. But the other thing is that I think it leads to more effective budgeting for us, and so we have a true, accurate cost representation about what we're spending in these different areas. One of the things that's been a challenge for us this year, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, is we have had a couple of major unforeseen capital expenditures that happened this year, and I'll actually show a picture of it later on, but one of our programs, one of our pathways is we have an auto shop that was open, and unfortunately in the month of in August, we had not even a large tractor, but a tractor come into the space to move some materials, and it fell through the floor. And so it was a suspended concrete floor, and we had to shut down the program or make moves to try to repurpose it, put it into a different area. We actually have it in an outdoor building right now, so they can work on cars. But that was an expense that ultimately is going to cost us over $300,000. And then the other thing that happened to us this year is our central office, which shares a roof with our early childhood program, that failed. And that was an expense of over $250,000. So those are two major unforeseen capital expenditures. We do still feel pretty good that we're going to live within our budget for this year, and we hopefully won't have to access any excess and deficiency this year to balance the budget. But it's just an example, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, about where we are in terms of the condition of our capital buildings, specifically our district-owned buildings, and also the need for us to be prepared when emergencies such like this arise. One thing I do want to make note about this budget year is we came and gave presentations last year, and we were concerned because it was the first year that Wachusett was in what they call hold harmless, and the increase to Chapter 70 that we received last year at the time, I think it was around originally maybe $200,000. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about the funding formula of the state and how flawed it is specifically for schools like Wachusett. But one of the things that Michelle and I said when we came around for these meetings is we tried to acknowledge the hardship that was put upon our towns to meet our budget request, and that we had said at that moment that if indeed they adjusted the Chapter 70 allocation for the Wachusett Regional School District, our recommendation to school committee would be to return that extra money to the towns as a reduction of their assessment, and we were able to do that. We returned, I think it was approximately $500,000 to the towns, and we thought that was very important because even though I know when you look at the increases to the budget, people may ask themselves, do they understand the financial situation we're in? And I just offer that as an example, is that we do, and we're trying to be good partners, and we will always try to be good partners and to help out and do our part whenever we can. The other big, I think, accomplishment this year is we've added a new ELA program, a high-quality curriculum for over 3,000 students. And so in grades K through 5 at Paxton Center School, they're using a new ELA curriculum. And then lastly, we had talked about needing to do some essential work at some of our buildings. Primarily it was at the high school. They had an intercom system where in the event of an emergency, they would not be able to talk to all faculty and staff in a way to manage the emergency and keep students safe, and so we were able to fix that. And then we also, in our theater, we did not have an operational sound system. We actually had to rent portable units for the year for them to get through their performances, music and theater. And so we were able to install a new system with the money that we had allocated in the budget. So we completed that work. And then finally, we had a project at the Early Childhood Center central office. It was the only building in the district that did not have a functional generator. We completed that project. And one of the reasons why it was that important, I guess I would say, is twofold. One is the Early Childhood Center. We're servicing children between the ages of 3 and 5. And if there's ever a building that you want to make sure has emergency power, it's that building. And then the other thing is that the central office being held there, a lot of our technology infrastructure throughout the district funnels through that building, and it actually impacts, it would have impacted town schools that maybe had not lost their power, but some of their communication would have been hampered if we lost power in that building. Tell you, never had. All right, sorry. Specifically, what happened in Paxton this year in FY25, quite a bit. And so Paxton actually received more additional staff than any school in the entire district. And so we added 3 classroom teachers. an additional kindergarten teacher, an additional grade 4 teacher, an additional grade 5 teacher. And then this year, Paxton enjoyed an additional K-8 counselor, an adjustment counselor. All of these changes were able to be budget neutral, and that they were due to eliminations of positions at other levels that were no longer needed. I pointed it out, though, because Paxton really needed it. You would have had class sizes at 26, 27 if we hadn't made those adjustments. And so obviously, we're thrilled that we were able to do that for the school. The other thing I just want to make sure we always share is that we are always trying to make sure we put district resources back into the school as appropriate. And so over the last 2 fiscal years, we've put over $414,000 into the Paxton Center School. These are all district-funded projects or improvements. They include kitchen and cafeteria improvements, additions and improvements to our plumbing and heating infrastructure, as well as a new phone system. And so, again, I only share that because I think a lot of times a town, especially Paxton, which is, our second smallest community that we serve, I want to make sure the town of Paxton residents and all of you know, we don't forget you. We don't look at improvements or look at things that are needed and say, wow, that's Paxton, we want to put the resources there. In this case, in this year, the most resources actually went to Paxton Center School. So in our budget development process for this fiscal year, I think one of the things that I would very much want people to walk away from this presentation knowing is that one of the primary drivers for our budget and the increase in town assessments is a flawed funding formula. And I'm going to share some examples of that. And I'd say this, Bay Path isn't here right now, but I'm going to say it because I say it every time I present this. What I'm going to show, or I hope to show you all tonight, is that the budget formula works well for some schools and districts, but not well for others. And I would argue that it works well for vocational schools, and it works well for urban schools. It does not work well for a lot of other districts in Massachusetts. Right now, over 2/3 are in what they call hold harmless, and so these are schools that are seeing minimum increases to their Chapter 70 funding. And so it's not only, though, that I think the budget formula undervalues what it takes to educate a student in the Wachusett Regional School District, it also disproportionately burdens our towns. And so the funding formula has a goal that each town is going to fund their allocation of the budget up to, I think it's 82.5%. And I think every year to move towns closer, especially in Paxton case, it's almost like you're getting a surcharge of 1 or 2% for the state to get you to that number. And effectively what it does is it magnifies any increases in the budget overall. And I think that's an issue, and I think it's also an issue because some of our towns in the district are already maxed out. So effectively, right now, Princeton and Sterling are paying the same amount as a Wellesley, as a Lexington, as a Weston. And these are not communities that are as wealthy as those comparables. And so one of the things I think you'll see is that what the state determines that we need in Wachusett to educate students and what they need at vocational or urban schools, it's actually twice the amount. And so what I've shared with you here, and again, this has nothing to do with the town. This is the state's determination of what they feel is appropriate to provide to districts and what they need to educate students. The state estimates that it takes about $13,000 to educate a student in Wachusett. However, in Leominster, they say it takes $18,000. In Worcester, they say it takes $20,000. At Monty Tech, it's almost $21,000. And at Bay Path, it's slightly more than $21,000. And so I wouldn't argue that a vocational model is more expensive to fund. I also wouldn't argue that the needs of students in Worcester and Leominster are probably greater than our own, okay? However, do I think that a single student should be funded between $7,000 and $8,000 more in those communities? I don't. And I certainly am not making the argument that these schools and districts should get less. What I am saying is the state needs to acknowledge that Wachusett needs more. For us to pretend that every student needs $6,000, $7,000 less to me is honestly at this point criminal. It's absolutely irresponsible. And so when we talk about the changes that need to happen in the state budget formula, this is one of the reasons why.
Hey, Jim, on that slide, I'm glad you're saying, I think I am, the back slide, I'm glad you're saying it takes more in Wachusett. I didn't want the takeaway to be, because you and I are both from Leominster,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want the takeaway to be that we're stupid and it takes more money to educate us.
Yeah.
That's not the intent of the slide.
Not at all. I've been saying the line that, Mark, if I wasn't a Mountaineer, I'd be a Blue Devil, and I mean it. I love Leominster. I worked there for over 10 years, and I think it's a district that the Student Opportunity Act was needed in Leominster, and they needed it. And I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that there are flaws in that formula, absolutely. But thank you. It's not.
Can I say one thing here? I'm kind of glad that Bay Path went first, because I don't know if you guys noticed that they didn't meet net school spending. That's their net school spending, and they're carrying money over to the next year. So the state's funding them perfectly. They're funding them so perfectly that they're not meeting net school spending. We have no problem meeting net school spending whatsoever. So that's how broken the formula is. It's not that they don't need it.
No.
They come close to needing it, which is great, but we're not getting enough. We're not being valued at enough, like Jim
Right.
said.
You can see this too. It's not just what they set out in terms of the cost for educating students. It also translates into what the state actually provides to supplement our budgets. This year, the state, our Chapter 78, it works out to about $5,500 per student. If you look again at Leominster, it's twice that. In Worcester, it's almost 3 times that. And at Monty Tech and Bay Path, it's more than twice that. What's confusing for me on this one, I will tell you, is that the communities that Wachusett is supported by, and then also Bay Path and Monty Tech, they're the same communities. So how the determination in terms of how much less Chapter 70 aid we knew, I don't understand. I don't see how that's possible.
I mean, this on its surface makes no sense.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
Yeah.
So what that piece, that's the state piece of net school spending that is right there. And if you looked at the whole net school spending piece, you can see that the town portion, and it's the whole, that budget is to pay for the whole state.
Yes.
So that's our, like, the
Right.
rest of our 13,000 is the town's portion to go
Yes.
to the whole
Yeah.
state, so.
But there's a vast difference on those numbers. It's not like
No.
this.
Well, you
Yeah.
see the next page.
Yeah, and so, one of the things that, again, and I appreciate what Mr. Love was saying, and I'm definitely not trying to pick on Leominster, but you look at comparables, right? We're about 500 students more than Leominster. The foundation budget that the state sets for Leominster is $111 million, and for Wachusett, it's about $88 million, and so a difference of about $23 million. And again, not criticizing or diminishing the needs of the students in Leominster, but trying to advocate for the needs of our own. And again, you see that in the Chapter 78, they're receiving almost twice the Chapter 78 that we do for less students.
Jim, is that Chapter 78 comparison, that's this year's hold harmless number?
It
Okay.
is. It is. I don't know, the per pupil piece wouldn't change too much. The Chapter 70 would change a little bit, but not anywhere near to make up the true difference in the two numbers. And one of the things, and I give credit to Barry Sklar, who's our technology person, one of the things he was wondering is, how does it look when you look at us compared to other regionals? And honestly, this is the one that got us most fired up. And these are all the regional schools that service K-12 students in Central Mass. And so we did a little bit of a data analysis on that. And what you can see is, again, the state does not, it says that Wachusett needs the fewest funds to educate its students. And you could certainly talk about either the model of education in terms of vocational schools or the needs of students when you maybe look at some more urban schools or gateways. However, how we are getting allotted less money than the SHOBA and some of, or $4,000 less than some other central Mass regionals, something's missing, something's wrong to be looking at these discrepancies.
So, again, just real quick, again, this is the same format we followed after Hold Harmless last year. Numbers were down. What is the district doing to get out of this?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel your pain, I really do.
So what I'd say to you.
What's the way out of this?
This isn't hold harmless. The way out of this, and we're going to get to it, is advocating to state legislator to blow up the funding formula. It's a funding formula that is not, like, the issues, right, and hold harmless definitely doesn't help us, but it would not change these numbers in a huge way. And these are funding formula based, not hold harmless based. Hold harmless certainly impacts us and would make changes in some of those numbers, but not to the extent that we're seeing these discrepancies. It wouldn't even be close.
So the hold harmless is basically taking away your increase over your foundation state settings, the Chapter 78, right? So you get your 36 million or whatever it is, and then you don't get the additional 10% that traditionally you got.
Yeah.
And this is more of a systemic problem that we've been seeing for years.
Exactly.
It got exacerbated with the Student Opportunity Act. The Student Opportunity Act solved the problems of the urbans and the Vokes. They got the money, but at the expense of Wachusett and others. So more and more districts entered into hold harmless. Specifically, last year is when it really came. It was like 80-something the year before last, and how many, like?
231.
Yeah,
It's 2 days, yeah, moved up by 21.
Yeah.
And
Or
it's,
it increased by like 80 districts last year, and then another 20.
Yep.
yeah, I mean, and I'll talk about hold harmless now. I'll say to you that I think there are two primary issues. I think there's an issue with how the state calculates hold harmless, because we're not in the typical hold harmless situation, but I also wouldn't want us to ignore the flawed funding formula that really does not even look at the true cost of educating students, or it does for some districts, and it completely ignores it for others. Because that number would not have changed at all. That original number I showed, that we were, I think, at 13 in comparison to like 20 in 3 of the districts, that wouldn't change at all because of hold harmless. That's just the state's calculation of what it costs to educate students in Wachusett. This would, though, and to your point, I think it's one of the things that it definitely has hurt us the last 2 years, is being in held harmless. The frustration in hold harmless, and the issue I have with hold harmless, is the number of students we lost to have us go into hold harmless in FY25 was 33. You have a district of nearly 6,800 students, and you lose 33 students, and your increase in Chapter 70 goes from 3,400,000 down to eventually 700,000. When we presented it last year, it was 200. We just gave you back the 500 at the end. That makes no sense. Hold harmless, I believe, was created for districts who would continuously see losses of students. Where we are is we're vacillating in between the two. And this isn't the only time. We were actually looking at population trends earlier today, just randomly. And there are times in the last 10 years where Wachusett had lost 100 or more students and didn't go into hold harmless. And so I'm not sure why that was. You know, part of it is an inflation factor that they look at. But again, like that kind of all or nothing calculation where you literally can lose 33 students and have this type of impact on your state funding for your school budget, again, I think it's unconscionable. This year, we are down more students. It's about 130.
So it was 61, not
Okay, 61, sorry.
And then
133?
doubled at 61
Yeah.
to 122.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Oh, yeah, it's just,
Still little.
It's still a
Yeah.
good
Still
comparison.
less
so,
than a
yeah.
percent of
but
our
thank you,
student
yeah,
body.
thank you for the correction. That's less than 2% of our student population. And so, again, like the impact on the Chapter 70 funding, which is honestly just one issue, again, with the calculation in terms of what it costs to educate a student. There are districts that would have 1,000 students And if they lost 122, I could understand it. But when you look at our scope and size, those 100 and, I'm gonna get it wrong again, 100 and, what'd you say,
This-
22?
For FY '25. So here's an interesting little piece of fact. See how we went up 3.4 million in FY '24? That was my first budget I prepared. It was only an increase of 50-something students. I'd have to look it up, but it was in the 50s. And then we went down those 61 students, I'm sorry, in FY '25. Up gave us 3.4 million, down gave us, actually, we only had 200, remember? Like, we only got an extra 200. So just, that, it doesn't even remotely make sense. So it was 61 in FY '25 down, and this year, we're down 122.
Is there a, first of all, this is a awesome presentation, like seeing it like this. I think it's really important because we always have this discussion in Paxton, the percentage that you can see how handcuffed you are in a lot of cases. Is there a, I don't know what the right word is for it, like, so is there, to Jeremy's point, like, what can you do? Is there a campaign? Is there something going on in the district?
There is, and we're going to talk about, there's actually going to be a meeting at the University of Massachusetts. They're going to have the Ways and Means Committee and look at local impact and contributions, and there's a lot of organization that's going around that. We have a couple links on our website that we'll share a little bit later too, and I think advocacy to both our representatives, but then also to the state level, it's really important. And at this point, it was mentioned earlier, it's over 2/3 of the district in Massachusetts are dealing with the hold harmless. And I don't, the last thing I want to do is come up here and look like I'm being a whiner or a complainer about things, but I will say, I feel like of those districts, we're particularly being impacted because of the size of our district. And so, we have a reduction of the number of students we have this year, but what that equates to, so people look at it and it's like, oh, you lost more than 100 students, you should be able to cut a lot of teachers. But really what that equates to is one less student in every 3 classrooms. And so instead of having 3 classrooms at 23, you got 2 at 23 and 1 in 22. There just aren't efficiencies there, the least that don't correlate with the change in state funding. And so the big thing about Chapter 70, when you have that cliff, because we're at the cliff, we heard a little bit about the cliff is coming, but we're there, and the towns are there, is that the state determination of each town's share of net school spending continues to rise. And so every year, like I said, you're getting that surcharge of really typically between 1% and 2% on top. The state calculations, the cost to educate our students, as I hope we kind of demonstrated before, they're seriously flawed for some of the districts. This has only been exacerbated by the hold harmless status, which I would 100% agree is impacting this as well. And all of it has an impact on what our revenue structure and our ask is in terms of this budget. The budget increase that we're requesting, and we'll go through the documents, is 5.82%. But the town assessment increase, because of some of these other factors and state calculations, is actually 7%. And its highest, right now, the increase in Paxton to the Paxton assessment would be higher than any of the other towns in the district at 7.99%. And so last year when we shared this, I talked about all the work we wanted to do in the district, and I spoke about, we knew that it was a surprise. We were surprised we were in hold harmless. We were surprised about the impact on our funding. And we knew that it was a terrible burden for the towns to bear. And so we didn't put forth anything. We have a strategic plan. And what I want to share with you now is our data, because although I'd love to say we can put off some of this work, I think our data suggests that we can't. And the bottom line is that, especially at the elementary level, the district is struggling. It's been struggling for a couple of years. I would say it's really started to struggle since we had disrupted learning in the pandemic. And the reason why is because, and I'll share some of our staffing ratios, is I think the district always did a good job, and I think the district had the ability with a very kind of skeletal staff and systems of support in place. I think we have families who care. They care about school. they're trying to support their kids, and the kids did pretty well. They didn't have a lot of needs. I would say one of the things that happened during the pandemic is we really disrupted learning for kids for over a year. And the number of students, and then also their acuity of need, it expanded. It got a lot higher. And one of the things we're seeing is that it's had a big impact on MCAS scores. And you see that at the state level, but you also see it in Wachusett. And we have not recovered to pre-pandemic levels at all. And we've started to make the move up, but we're still, almost, I think it's 10 percentage points behind. And so I share this slide because I think it's important. I talk about data and a culture of data, but I also think you need to be transparent. And the bottom line is our kids aren't doing great right now. And in the grades to 3 to 8, if you look at all the students, so this counts every student who's attending third through 8th grade, and how they do on the MCAS, only 49% are meeting or exceeding expectations, 49%. Another way to say that is 51% either aren't meeting it at all or only partially meeting it, all right? And then if you look at high-need students, okay, and how they're doing in English, it's even worse, all right? High-need students are students who are on special education plans, students who are English learners, and then also students who come from socioeconomic challenge backgrounds, okay, food insecure families, other things where money's tight. And again, when you look at that percentage, 27% are meeting or exceeding expectations, or another way to look at it, 73% are only partially or not meeting the expectations. And it's similar in math. The scores are a little bit better, but certainly not to the level I feel like we should aspire to. And while I would share that we're doing better than the state, we definitely should be doing better than the state, and we should be doing a lot better in the state. And so I share this just because where I think we could put off some things last year, we really are at a point where we feel like we've maximized the work in a budget neutral sense, and at some point we have to offer some interventions to help get these kids the help they need. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but just a quick question. So I think you mentioned that pre-pandemic, the numbers were roughly 10% higher.
I'm going off. I did horrible on my estimates on the number of students that we were off, so I got a little nervous. Yeah, so we've looked at it and we've made growth towards it, but yeah, I think I'm going to estimate it's about 10% that we're still behind, as is the state. But I think one of the things that worried me, to be honest with you, and I can, one of the things we're happy to do is get some more data for you. So you're like, hey, I want to see the trends or where it looks like longitudinally. I'm happy to. We are, and I think one of the things that's been hard is when you look at our growth, we're not outpacing the state as much as I think we should. We're inching up with them, but I would have to think that we could exceed them and should be exceeding them.
Thank you.
Was the state 10% higher too?
Yeah.
So it was all.
Yeah, pretty much across the board. So, what are the proposed supports? How do we think we can impact learning in the district? And so, one of the things we've been working very hard on is that we were a district, and one of the reasons why we were so cognizant of making class size adjustments is right now, if you walk into Paxton Center School, you may have one Title I tutor who supports that entire school if kids are struggling learning. And kids who are on IEPs may have scaffolded or direct supports to help them in their learning. They may meet with a special education teacher. But if you're not eligible for special education, there really isn't anyone beyond the classroom teacher who can help support you if you're struggling. And that's hard when you're asking somebody to teach a classroom of 24 students, 22 students, and they're trying to individually reach a kid who may be struggling, and they also are trying to teach the entire class. It begins to, you can see how kids learning, if not addressed, can lead to bigger issues. And what the research says is that how a student is achieving by third grade is actually a predictive factor about how they'll graduate from high school, whether they'll graduate from high school, and the number of supports they may need to do so. And so I feel like, and I've always felt this way, that the critical age range to intervene with students is as early as possible. And what this is one of the things we're proposing is to have interventionists in grades 1 and 2. And so what that would mean is, and I'll talk about this specifically, but basically any school that services 1 to 2 first and second grade students would have a person who can directly work with those students 4 times a week for 45 minutes, and hopefully get them timely support in a manner that's going to get them to the point where they don't need to be eligible for a special education program. They don't need to have a bunch of extra tutoring services when they get into a higher level, because they can't access the content that they're teaching. Because that's the thing, you learn how to read, write, those basic literacy skills up until 2nd grade. But once you get to 4th, 5th, 6th grade, you're applying those skills and learning content. And so if you don't have those skills, that's when school becomes a struggle for the remainder of your career. The other thing we're advocating for is STEAM positions, and these are for grades K through 5. Again, these are positions where one of the things I talked about work we've done in district that to try to help support and improve our educational process. One of the things we've done is getting those new curriculums. The other thing we've done is we set some expectations on how you implement that curriculum. And so one of the things we found out in my second year here is that we had classrooms that were only doing 45 minutes of English instruction. And then we had some that were doing 110. And so, I was told when I was hired, teachers at the high school could tell what school a child went to. And so if you can imagine that, depending on what town or what school your child attended, you may have twice as much time on ELA than you did if you attended another school in the district. And so we put an end to that. And we followed the recommendations of our new curriculum, and now they spend 2 hours everywhere on ELA instruction at the elementary grades. Similarly, we have 90 minutes of math because that's the recommendation of the program, and that's what the research says it will be effective at. One of the byproducts of that, though, is that we don't get to spend the requisite time or the time we would like to supporting social studies and science. And one of the things you'll see that we're promoting is to add STEAM positions, which would be another related arts. Right now, and honestly, when we think back, or at least when I think back, I went to school, or at least in middle school, I took gym, music, art, industrial arts, home ec. You had this rotation of things. Right now in Wachusett, primarily you have gym, music, and art. And on those other days, it's a jury-rigged some type of program. But I can tell you it's not, I'm not sure it has the educational value. I know it doesn't have the educational value it would if we were able to offer another related arts period that focused on science. And I'll talk about some of the benefits of that. The other thing we're trying to address through this budget is address some inequities that exist across the district. And what I've done with this list is kind of show you where Paxton Center School would apply to these. You would get an interventionist at Paxton Center School. I don't know what the adjustment, you have a STEAM teacher in part that teaches your upper grades. The programming, though, would then be offered for all grades. And if we needed to make a staffing adjustment there, we would. It would not be a full teacher. But then the other thing you don't have in Paxton that we have at other schools is a team chair, a designated team chair. And a team chair is a person who runs all of your special education meetings. They're an expert in special education and typically can drive that process to make sure it's done in a manner that's fair, equitable, and consistent across the district. And right now, we don't have that at Paxton Center, but we have it at a lot of our other schools, and that's an adjustment that we're hoping to make as well. We'd also add a special education teacher, a BCBA, a nurse at one of our schools, and an internship coordinator. What I want to focus on, though, and so when people see this list, please know we're not asking to add a net of 20 positions. That's not what we're doing, and we'll show you how we feel like we can get this funded a lot from within our own budget. And so why are we promoting these positions? Well, number one, as I said in the beginning, it's aligned with best practices in research. These are the things that have been proven to have an impact on students. It's also in support of our strategic plan. I talked about our strategic plan, and while we had a year last year where we could spend doing more foundational work on a strategic plan, put systems in place to be ready for these resources. we really have maxed out at this point. We've added the new curriculums. We've added the new data systems. Right now, we need help to actually work with these kids. The other thing we're trying to do is continue to address systemic inequities. I don't think it's fair that Paxton Center School is one of 4 out of 13 schools that right now doesn't have a team chair. And then the other thing I would want folks to know about this is that this is, in my mind, I really truly believe this is ultimately going to result in cost savings for the district. And I'm a big believer, like, you can pay now or pay later, but most of the time when you pay later, you end up paying more. And this is one of those cases that I think we would have a big shift in our students' baseline abilities and literacy skills if we made some of these improvements at the elementary level. And I would say traditionally, the level that is most under-provisioned and under-supported is elementary in all districts, but it certainly has been the case here in Wachusett. And so a little bit more about what interventionists are. Interventionists are highly qualified educators who specialize in identifying and supporting struggling learners. So they're teachers, but they're teachers who have a specific skill set. And again, what I would say is imagine Paxton Center School and imagine every first and second grade classroom 4 days a week has another adult in that room who can help support kids who may be having trouble. And that would be for four times a week for 45 minutes. They're experts in scaffolding and instruction. Kids struggle usually because the lesson plan that you present isn't accessible to all of them. For 80%, it may work fine, but 20%, they may need some adjustment in that instruction. And sometimes you don't know until you begin to assess them and you start to see, wow, they didn't get that. And so then the job is to go back and try to either reteach or to try to teach it in a different way. And so one of the things that's a benefit of your lower elementary grades is you have what you call centers, and there are times where you do whole group or, they learn a certain skill, but then you have the opportunity to practice. And usually one group is working with the teacher and they'll rotate around. But when you can have a second person there who's doing more defined intervention to helping students who are struggling, the likelihood that they're going to get what they need and to be able to catch up quickly is far more likely. The other thing about an interventionist is they would be modeling for teachers, so they have this capacity themselves as well. So they're experts in looking at data and said, oh, this child needs help on, I don't know, initial sound or blending or whatever it is. And they can help look at the teachers and say, here, we can use this lesson or we'll try to do this activity. And so you're increasing the capacity of all your staff to do that and to interact with data. And I think the last piece that would be advantageous about this position is we are trying to improve our homeschool connection. And so one of the things that happened this year in the district is for the first time, I think possibly in a long time, if not ever, we offered conferences for families who had students between the grades of 3rd and 8th. We used to only offer conferences for K-2 and at the high school level. And so we see interventionists also as being people who can reach out to somebody at home and say, hey, we're working with Johnny or Susie or whoever, and wanted you to know what we're working on, and try to build that understanding of this is where they're struggling. Hey, and if the parent says, I'd love to help out at home, well, here's some stuff you could do. That would be great. And so that's another area we could improve in the district, and I think we probably don't do enough. We understand that all parents could do that, but all our parents want to do that, and I think it is only going to have a bigger impact on a child's achievement. Why STEAM? STEAM emphasizes collaboration, critical thinking, inclusivity, and real-world problem solving. And so Project Lead the Way is the curriculum that we would use for this. And again, it's a grant-funded curriculum that we've already got. And so, but the thing about science, and I kind of almost related to when we were talking about kids being able to practice the application of what they're learning, it's hands-on. And kids get excited by hands-on learning. And so it's interactive, it involves critical thinking, but they get to do projects based on the things they've learned, and they start to see, oh, that's why this is important. It typically is some of the things that have the highest student engagement, so you're starting to build a thirst, a desire to learn in students. And as I said, it is something that we already have a curriculum to support. I think the one thing I always try to be transparent about when I talk about this is it's also going to help us meet contractual obligations. And so in that contract that's going to finalize next year, we had some teachers in the district that weren't getting a daily prep. all right? And so there was a part in the contract where as long as you reached the total number of minutes, teachers didn't necessarily need a daily prep, and mostly this was happening at the elementary level. My heart goes out, and I got to say that I respect all teachers, but I particularly respect elementary teachers because they are experts in multiple content areas and typically are spending the entire day with their class. And so if there was ever a group who needed to make sure they were prepared to do the next lesson after perhaps 3 hours on something else, it's your elementary teachers. And again, if we're expecting them to look at data and adjust their lessons, it's important that they have a designated time to do so. I think this is one of those things, like some of the things I spoke about today, honestly, they're already in most school districts across the state. And most school districts across the state, too, have an identified daily prep for their elementary teachers. So it's important that we take this final step. Does it have to be accomplished by STEAM teachers? No. But I would say if we're not doing that, then what we're probably doing is warehousing the kids for 45 minutes. And that's a waste of time. And again, I think our data demands that we make maximum use of every moment that we have with them. So how are we going to afford it, and what's the impact on the budget? And so what I would share is, much like I shared the additional positions that we were able to add at Paxton Center School this past year, we are going to continue to look within and to make sure every position that we have in the district is one that we actually need. And so an example of that is right now we have 10 retirements that we know are going to happen in teachers. And so there's an opportunity there where the most effective way to eliminate a position or a position that you don't need is to do so when there's a natural vacancy. And so we look at all 10 of those retirements, and we certainly will be asking the question, is this a position we still need? And even if we don't do that, what I would share, and this is just an example of the process we go through, you typically are going to see approximately between a minimum of $35,000 and $40,000 of a savings when you go from a retired teacher to typically we let the principals know we're not going to hire above a master's level 3. And so that typically that savings range is a minimum of $40,000, and it could be over $100,000 if you end up not replacing the position, and it could be $120,000 depending on the benefits that you were paying. And so those are some ways that we've identified that we're going to be able to create some money. The other thing is continue to look at class size adjustments. Much like I spoke, you needed extra teachers at Paxton, we do the same. And so if we look at our class sizes and we'll be within compliance of school committee recommendations by reducing the number of teachers at a certain level, grade level, we do that as well. And we will continue that practice moving ahead. The other thing we're going to keep doing is making sure we're leveraging grants. We apply for as many as we can that make sense for the district, and we've been pretty successful overall about getting them. And then the other thing that we've committed to is advocating to school committee to reconsider school choice. And so we have not been a school choice district for a number of years, and that is a revenue source that I think the district administration will be advocating for the school committee to consider. I think a lot of times they do ask, and it's a legitimate question, how can you be talking about needing additional staff? Because we hear the stories, and I've heard town meetings where people talk about our secretaries have secretaries. All right. Truth is, we have one secretary at a school, and honestly, they don't work summers, and they work very hard. And what I want to show here, and please understand, this isn't, again, me whining or complaining. What it is, though, is it's a true analysis of what our true staffing levels are. And I'm sharing that not because my goal is to get us up to the state staffing level, but it's to point out that we are lower than the state and have always been, regardless of what our enrollment is. And I think what's important to know is for us to be at the average state level of teachers per 100 students, we would have to add 97 teachers to the district. We are not advocating for 97 teachers. We're probably only really looking for a net gain of about 8 teachers. But I do feel like it's important to know that, because it's why it's also when people say, well, you're going to have to cut. When we are already at the staffing level, if we ended up needing to cut teachers, it would be cataclysmic to the district, because we just aren't staffed to the levels most places are. And again, I'm not saying we need to be at the state level. I do feel like, though, it's an important metric for us to consider. And kind of like when we looked at the comparison in terms of in terms of comparing to other local Central Mass regional districts, this is in comparison to our DART peers, okay? And what this is these are the districts that we get compared to when they look at our academic performance, or our MCAS. So when they set the goals of where the district should be, these are the districts that they compare us to. And so I actually tried to, we used another format, so this was a little bit easier to follow. And so on this page, you can see the names are off, but it looks at all of the districts and the state average in comparison to Wachusett. And one of the things you'll notice is that Wachusett is near the bottom for all of these staffing areas. And so with the exception of paras, and I will tell you that one of the areas we've been cutting is paraprofessionals. Because I think you would see that we had more paras than we necessarily needed, or the paraprofessionals weren't having the impact on students that we thought additional teachers would. And so we reduced by a couple paraprofessionals and had another teacher. And so when you compare Wachusett to the state average, which is in blue, and then all these others are our other DART peers, we're second from the bottom in terms of teachers. Our administration is tied for last. Student support, tied for second to last. Clerical support, tied for second to last. And technology, tied for third to last. And so, again, I don't say that because I'm up here with my plans of we need to be at the top. I'm not advocating for that at all. What I'm advocating for, though, is I want people in the public to understand that we really aren't as flush with staff as I think people often believe. And then also that the reason why we're advocating for certain positions is because a lot of districts already have them, and they're having the impact, but we haven't traditionally in Wachusett. And so just briefly, because I do feel like it's important to share with towns in terms of what would happen if we needed to cut on the budget. And this is typically the analysis you go through when you do personnel reduction. And basically what you consider is that due to the fact that a lot of these positions, there won't be the natural attrition that you get when you have a retirement, that you have to assume that you're going to have to pay unemployment, at least for a period of time. And so usually you plan on about 2/3 of a cost savings for every position that you eliminate. You can only cut people traditionally with 1 to 3 years of experience because teachers have what they call professional status after year 3, which protects them. And so as long as if you have a person who does not have professional status but a similar license, that is the person that you need to get rid of. And you keep veteran teachers, but it also means the people you cut are actually making the least. And so it tends to make it even less cost-effective measure. And so we looked at what are the salary estimates for that average teacher we have with 1 to 3 years experience, and then also look at the average benefits package that they have. So take the percentage that take benefits and whether or not it's family or not. And what we come up with is that for every teacher you cut, you'd save approximately $50,000. And for paraprofessionals, it'd be about $22,500. And just as an exercise, so to reduce the budget, which unfortunately, really the only place you can do it is personnel when 80% of your budget is personnel. And like I said, when Michelle shares our appropriations, you'll see I'm extremely proud of how tight we are in our appropriations and what the increases are. But if you wanted to save $500,000 from the budget, it's 10 teaching positions or 22 paraprofessionals. And I will share that because of the number of paraprofessional reductions that we've already made in the district, it would be teachers. It would be teachers.
I think there's a plus and minus button at the top too, Michelle. Julia noticed that might navigate you.
Plus and minus.
At the
But
top.
is this touchscreen?
It is touchscreen, yes.
Plus and minus button. That's all right. Good. Roll me along, Jim. All right, the first thing we have is just the enrollment update. So you can see that, now our enrollment, these numbers that you're seeing here aren't the Chapter 70 or the foundation budget calculation of who's enrolled. Those numbers are different because how the state calculates it is based on who the district is financially responsible for. These budget numbers that we use that are the kids who are actually sitting in the seats from the towns. So when we're allocating out the discretionary piece and the transportation, it is based on the number of debt service is based on high school students. So it's based on the actual students from your towns that are sitting there, not who the district is financially responsible for. So you can see that Paxton, you had a drop of 4 students. Go ahead, Jim. Roll me up. All right. We talked about the foundation budget a little bit. The minimum local contributions this year, your Paxton has increased 5.43%. So that's probably the same 5.43% that you saw with Bay Path when they came in. So that minimal local is where you start. As far as, it's touchscreen and I'm putting papers on it. So that's where the increase starts right there. The state is saying it's going to cost you this much more. You see a bigger increase in Sterling. He talked a little bit about that target share. Paxton isn't near that 82.5% that the state tries to get you to. So once you're there, there's not a huge increase. But to get you there, depending upon how you fall with your revenues, like how the revenue growth is in your town, that's how they determine what percentage more they're going to notch you up to that target share. All right, our budget's by appropriation. I'm not going to go through what we've been through in the past. I think you guys know that at this point, we are doing a budget based on what we need. Like I've come to the point of where the department chairs, and the principals come and say, this is what we need. Like, it's not, I'm just gonna increase the budget by the previous year budget. It's actual numbers behind it. So the salary and stipends, that went up 4.92%. Our contractual bargaining unit, cost of living adjustment, it was 2.75% for this year. We have in all of our all of them. They all have levels that they level up to. So if you look at someone who's going up a level, that can be anywhere from, a lot of the tables are a little different. It can be anywhere from 2 to 5%. So actual, like when I average out who's leveled up and gotten bigger increases and the actual cost of living adjustment, it was just a little over 4% was the salary increases. In there, I've also included, it's a bigger jump than that because we have one bargaining unit that has not settled their contract. So I'm looking at an entire year's retro for a larger bargaining unit. And then I also have to include in there people who are retiring. They have retirement benefits coming back to them. We have people who change, the teachers who change to a different salary because of getting an advanced degree. We call it a lane change. That's included in there as well. And then also people who have some longevity increases when they hit certain years of service. So that's included in there. And then, of course, the positions that we're trying to add, which is like we're kind of banking on like 10, probably a net of 10 positions that we're trying to find some efficiencies for. The benefits and insurance, the next line, you see a 9.47 increase. In that line, one of the biggest pieces there is the employer Medicare. So that there's going to, obviously, if salaries go up, our employer Medicare portion is going to go up that additional 1.45% in there. We also have our health insurance increase this year that is calculated in this budget is a 7.1% increase for our commercial plans. It was at 8%. We have a PEC that agreed to take a plan design change to decrease the amount of increase. So we're at 7.1% for that. Our Medicare plans, or the retiree plans is what we call them, those actually increased at that goes on a calendar year. So the increase that happened in January was a 16.5% increase on those plans. And our Worcester County retirement is up 11.04% for the retirement benefits for the paraprofessionals, the custodians, the secretaries. I'm not sure who else puts in Worcester County. They do? Okay, the ABAPAs, so a good portion goes there as well. The next line, instructional support, that makes some repairs to the high school that are in dire need. The auto shop floor is one of them, to replace the floor that failed. We also have some severe needs on some concrete sidewalks surrounding the high school. Some of you, if you've walked in the front of the building, has seen it. And our phone system, which we weren't able to get in this year. Again, it's some communication issues that we need to get that phone system fixed. The pupil services, you see a big increase here. It's a small amount, but it's a big increase because we've been keeping all of our athletic fees that we charge, which the district charges, we're on the high side for what we charge compared to other school districts for athletic fees, but we're not taking in enough money to cover all of the costs of the athletic program, and we're upside down in that revolving account. So the Department of Revenue says you can't have a negative balance in a revolving fund. It gets paid through the general budget, so appropriated through the general budget. So we moved $170,000 for athletic transportation. And the other piece of that is too, we were paying, I think, $16,000 a year to replace batteries in our AEDs throughout the district. And we can replace the AEDs for a total of a little under $60,000 and not have that $16,000 a year to replace batteries. So we're opting to, instead of replacing batteries, we're going to just buy the equipment that doesn't require a $16,000 cost. So that's the big increase that's happening there. Other operating costs, that reflects our tuition out charges. That comes right off the cherry sheet. For charter school kids who are chartering out and school choice students who are choicing out. I looked at those numbers. It's pretty even, half and half of that $1.4 million. Is that what it is? Where am I losing my? Yeah, it's actually about $1.5 million. So half is chartering out and half is the school choice out. So that's what we're paying for kids going out. And then our transportation, we're in the second year of our contract with A Transportation. We have a 5.5% increase for our regular ed students. The special ed students, we're in the second year of that contract as well. The in-district students, that's a 6.6% increase. Our out-of-district transportation, I'm dropping that just a little because we're having a decrease in out-of-district students. I miss special ed tuitions, that's up there. Our special ed tuitions, we have an increase of 5.83%. Our out-of-district tuitions for special ed students are actually going to be over $10 million. We reduced that. We have the circuit breaker reimbursement fund that we're going to use $4.5 million out of there to reduce what is in the budget. And we also get the federal grant, the IDEA federal grant, and we use $1.5 million out of that grant in order to supplement what we put into the regular budget for special ed tuitions. And then the debt service, that's decreasing. We just, I think, have 2 small bonds left for the high school projects, and that represents $515,000 of principal and $68,900 in interest. So, yep.
Hey, just a quick question.
Sure.
Apologies if I don't get this right. Is it ID?
IDEA,
Okay.
IDEA.
Okay.
I don't want to say
Right.
IDEA.
Is that-
It's IDEA.
Is that from the Federal Department of Education?
Yes.
Because I saw something this afternoon. It's just being talked about. How much is that?
Well, the total grant that we get is a little under 2 million, maybe 1.89 or something, I think is what we got last year. We use $1.5 million to cover out-of-district tuitions. My understanding on those federal grants, as far as I've heard, they're not touching they're saying they're not touching the educational ones.
was my
But could that
question.
change?
Okay.
I don't know, like, that was
Yeah.
my last,
Okay.
when they were saying they were freezing all the fundings of the grants, and if you went, you got the list, I went out, got the list, and it didn't look like there was any touch to the educational ones. What can happen between now and then?
That was just my question.
Yeah.
If you had an immediate concern.
Tho- Do those out of school, out of district placements, do they have are those rolling off at some point?
Yeah, so we've actually dropped our students, I believe we have 78 this year. We're dropping to 65 next year, but it depends on their placements, and we'll have even more aging out throughout next year. So we've calculated even with those students aging out. So I did drop the transportation charges for out of district because of the decrease in the students going out. So, and the OSD sets the rate for what the increase in tuition, out of district's tuitions will be, and the increase this year was 3.67%, or the increase for FY25 is 3.67%. So we're on our revenue sources. So you can see that Chapter 70, we're getting an additional 1.37%, or an additional $500,000, because we're in that hold harmless again. So that equates out to, I think that the Chapter 70 foundation budget was 6,630 students, so we're getting that times $75 is what that equates to. The Chapter 71 transportation, I believe that the calculation, again, I take that right from the cherry sheet, and as the Bay Path people said earlier, these are the first governor's budget preliminary numbers. I think that was calculated at like 81% of what we report on our end of year report. So last year they only calculated it at 78%. And then charter tuition aid, we're going down. We have less kids that are coming our way, so we're getting a decrease in that. And actually, I think that's an allocation by the state. It's not actual charter kid schools who come back to us. It's an actual calculation by the state. So those are our state aid, kind of already given to you. The next four pieces are Medicaid, interest, miscellaneous revenue, and excess and deficiency are our local aid. What I actually have to come up and calculate how much we think we're going to get. I've increased all of these this year. I've taken some time to try to allocate as much as I can to get the town assessments to a place that that is more palatable. So the last, actually the Medicaid of $850,000, I anticipate that our administrative and direct service claims are going to end this year at $850,000, a little bit over actually. I just recalculated with the Medicaid manager again today, and we're anticipating $853 for this year. We were at like $847 a couple weeks ago. So that's where the $850,000 go. There is another piece to that reimbursement program that they call it a, I'm not going to get the name right, but they do another evaluation. They go through and make sure that you're getting all the claims possible. And for the past couple of years, we have gotten additional revenues from that cost report, as that's what she calls it. So the cost report, so they do get some additional revenues back. Interest. We've done well. The last couple of years, we've been lucky enough to have a treasurer that makes sure that our funds are sitting in MMDT to get the best interest rates that we can possibly get. So these revenues have been a little understated in the last 2 years. That's what's actually provided us with some E&D, because it's been additional revenues that weren't budgeted for. So I'm increasing it to $400,000 this year. We did last year get I think 672,000. We're on track to receive about 600,000 this year. I know our interest rates are dropping. I just want to be realistic. I don't want to overshoot it. I'd rather undershoot it and have a little E&D than to overshoot it. The miscellaneous revenue, I upped that to 350,000. We've averaged in the past few years, most of the miscellaneous revenue that comes in is money that we get back from other towns for out-of-district transportation. We bill back if there's other towns' responsibility to pay us back some transportation charges that we have that sits in a miscellaneous revenue account. And then the last piece, excess and deficiency. We do have a balance in our excess and deficiency. You know this probably better than I do. This is one I don't get.
usually
Is
say
it
it and you correct
2.5 or 2.3?
I say 2.4 and you go, Jim, it's closer to 2.5.
Is
So
it?
between
Okay.
2.4 and 2.5.
It's a little,
I think it's 2.4.
yeah.
2.527218.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, I have it, it's written down on a paper. I should look at my papers a little more carefully.
I'm just glad you asked.
Yeah, thank you. And as I said, most of that accumulation in the last 2 years has been because we've underestimated our revenues. So we're trying to estimate a little better. We do not want to dip our E&D too deeply. What we're putting in here, how I'm calculating this $500,000 is I'm wildly optimistic that the state is going to come back and instead of giving us $75 per student on the Chapter 70, that they're going to come up to the 104 that they did last year. It's been mentioned at a couple of conferences I've gone to. It's out back at the legislator place too. So that would be a couple $100,000. The other pieces is regional transportation reimbursement. I know that we're going to get, there's a difference between what was on last year's budget and what we are going to get if we just get what we got last year, which is about $300,000. So I am saying, let's give this up front instead of saying, when we get more, we'll give it back to you. We're just going to allocate that E&D now, and if it does come back to us, it rolls back into E&D for us. So that's where I'm coming up with the $500,000. We really want to preserve our E&D for the next year where we have some money to help. But for our budget, which is $129 million, $2 million in E&D is not a lot of money. It's not a lot of room for error. So
2.5, but about 2%.
yeah, so I'm trying to be as generous as possible without putting us into to have huge financial strains. Next one. What do we got? So your assessment increase is, as Jim said, is the highest out of all of them. A lot having to do with how they're moving you toward that, how the state is moving you toward that target range. So it's 7.99%. That's a difference of $618,543. Mark, I love that you said that it was only a $57,000 increase for the vocational schools. I know this is a lot more money, and I know it's hard for the towns, but the state is telling you guys what you have to pay for the vocational schools. I am so jealous that the state doesn't give us the opportunity to say, this is what you have to pay for your students. And if they did, and they were funding it like you're funding the vocational schools, our budget would be $161 million. I did the math while I was sitting here. And that's what we would be asking for. We have 615, you have 615 students that you're looking after. So
I just wanted to
Oops.
do the dance. No. So just wanted to briefly touch upon some of the projects, and we've already presented these projects, but for clarity's sake, and then also for consistency, there is a project at the Paxton Center School. We remain concerned about the boiler there, and just want to say the recommendation from the district was 2 boiler units, but I think we certainly had presented at the time that if that was incremental, that we could get to that point. The issue is the boilers were installed in 1997, and they have an estimated 15-year lifespan. And just to give an example of the condition they're in, we only had 1 active boiler at the school during the winter of 2024. And so if the other boiler had gone out, we would have been forced into an emergency. We probably would have had to close school in Paxton for a couple days, and then get a portable unit to try to make it through the remainder of the winter. The reason why we were down to one boiler, and the reason why we're making the request to replace them, is the parts aren't available anymore. And so we had a cracked boiler section in the spring of '23. And typically what we do is during the summer, go in, look at the boilers, replace any parts we can, fix anything. And at that time, we realized it wasn't just a maintenance issue. We'd have to order the part. The part was ordered in the summer of '23. It arrived in the fall of '24. And so over a year, wait for a part. And so if one of the boilers goes down again, we're looking at more than a 12-month wait. And then if both of them went down, we could be a year without a boiler at the school. And so, it has served its life. When you put it in 97, we're looking at already 28 years, almost 30. It's almost double what you would expect for the lifespan. And so we are asking for that consideration. Both units are working right now, and so I don't want people to be concerned, but just based on what our track record has been with them, we get nervous that there's not going to be another breakdown in the future. The other thing I shared with you, and Michelle asked us about pictures, and so this is our auto shop floor at the high school, and that's the tractor that went through, and thank goodness it stopped when it did. This was the hole that was left. And if you can imagine students in here working on autos, we feel very fortunate that there wasn't a tragedy. So this room right now is condemned. We are currently getting estimates in terms of rebuilding the floor, and we'll be working on it. But I primarily share that because it kind of speaks to the condition of some of our facilities, including our district facilities. And the other thing we're asking for consideration this year is the establishment or the consideration of towns to let us establish a capital stabilization fund. And Bay Path actually talked about that a little bit earlier tonight. It is something that we presented to school committee and school committee approved. However, to have a capital stabilization account, you have to have it approved by the towns as well. And so the purpose of the capital stabilization fund for us would be to fund emergency capital needs, much like I showed on that previous slide, or much like the roof that we experienced at the early childhood and the early childhood center. I think it's important to note we're not looking to we're not looking to replace major products that we would typically pursue through a debt exclusion. At some point, we have to have a plan for improvements at the high school. That project now took place over 20 years ago, and it's starting to fail. And so I think when we can get prepared to do it, we're going to come up with a proposal and request to our towns to possibly consider a debt exclusion at that time. And so we share that because we don't want to think, like, I know that would be probably the preferred mechanism for towns to support capital improvements at a certain cost. And so we would continue to go through that process. But what this fund would allow us to do is if we have situations like we experienced this year and we had the money in that budget, this year we were able to do it because of an additional transportation appropriation. That's not going to happen every year. And so to have some system where we can address either emergencies or also plan for larger products that wouldn't necessarily qualify for a debt exclusion, allow us to pay for those, it would make sense, and we could keep them out to a certain extent of the general budget. And so we're not always putting money into the budget because we have anticipated needs that might come up. It's more you have a designated fund that you would only use in a case that something failed and was over a certain price point. And so we're asking for the towns to consider that, and that's one of the things that will be on the town warrant. I think one of the things I share is, like, for our district buildings right now, last year we put in $500,000 for those improvements we shared, the intercom, the generator, and the sound system in the theater. This year it's $800,000 for concrete repairs. If you come up to the high school, you're taking a risk that you're either going to turn an ankle or turn your knee. And some of these areas are where we are accessible ramps. And so the need is very dire right now for some of those systems. And so we really are just seeking pathways that allow us to responsibly address capital needs and don't put an undue burden or create an emergency for our towns. school committee's working on a policy. I think they would hope to have a draft policy or a past policy, so town members could look at the conditions that the fund would operate on and have confidence, like, it's not, it's not meant to be a slush fund, let me put it to you that way. It's meant to be able to logically and thoughtfully address capital needs as they arrive. And so that's just for people's consideration. If people want additional documentation for that, we're happy to provide it. The other thing we wanted to share in terms of next steps, we were asked a little bit about what can we do about the funding formula. And, two things we would want folks to be aware of is if you go to our website, there's a new section on the budget. And we're putting up as many materials there as we can, both about our presentations, the positions we're advocating for, but also opportunities for advocacy. And right now, the two main opportunities for advocacies are letters to legislatures, right? I think here we're Representative Ferguson and Senator Durant, who have been good, I have to say. They come to meet with us. They're coming to meet with us next Tuesday or Monday in the district. And I think the issue a lot of times isn't whether or not they're aware of our needs, it's the voice in the state government. And I talked about how for a lot of urban school districts, the funding formula is working. And a lot of your wealthier communities around 128, they don't want to change the funding formula because proportionally, like I said, I do feel like a lot of our towns are being treated like they're far wealthier than they are. And so there are some power brokers, I think, in my opinion, in the state legislature that aren't necessarily eager to look at the funding formula. And so the more that we can raise that collective voice of the 230 plus that are impacted right now, I think the better shot that this is actually going to happen. And the next event is going to be a week from this coming Monday. It's going to be at UMass Amherst. Michelle and myself, I think some school committee members and potentially some staff will be going to advocate. And I do feel like it's something that you're going to see on the news because I think it finally has the critical force behind it that people are realizing it has to have an impact. And I hope by some of the data we shared with you earlier tonight, it becomes clear that this is really the driving force that's at least causing our budget to move forward. I mean, I think that number, Michelle pointed it to me earlier tonight and just said 161. We're not asking for a budget that gives us $161 million. We are asking for the state to pay a higher share and also recognize that what they're asking for us now to call operational is really minimum what's needed in the district. Because I think that, again, is something that pits towns against school districts because people don't understand, why are you asking for this? How come the vocational schools can come in and they're not asking for that? And the reason is because they're far better funded. That's the simple truth. And if we were funded at their level, we wouldn't be asking you for anything extra either. So, and with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, if I think you don't have to find it. It was on a very, very early slide. So this funding formula was it 1992?
Yep.
Ed reform, was it probably around ed reform? That's when the funding formula.
Yep.
It's really stunning because there's been so much demographic change. If you just look at locally here, the town of Rutland, what it was in 1992 versus today, there's no comparison. So never mind all the growth around 128 and 495. It's just, I want to note that. You know it, but people, that's a long time and a lot of change for that not to be upgraded.
Yeah, and I think the one change that I'm aware of is the Student Opportunity Act, which I'm glad they address the needs of the urban centers. I'm not complaining about that. But I also have to wonder if that's exacerbated the impact on the other districts.
Yeah.
And, I really think that they need to look at the rest of the towns and the rest of the districts and the impact on them.
Jim and Michelle, the hour is late, and I don't think I can sum up 40 pages of presentation in an hour and a half, but I'm going to make some comments anyways. There were a lot of bar graphs that spoke to the point of the state formula being flawed. Near the end, I think when Michelle was presenting, I don't want to call up the page, but the state aid this year has increased 1.39%.
Yep.
And yet, what is being asked or mandated by the state to pass on to the 5-member towns is 4.5%. I mean, the disconnect on that alone is striking. I don't know what they're thinking. The downside about the flawed formula, and I want to be careful, but I want to make sure I make my point. I've heard that for 15 years that I've been sitting on the Finance Committee. Tonight has got to be a watershed night that kicks everybody in Paxton into action. All the elected officials, the school committee, the Central Mass Legislative Caucus, the elected select board members, Finance Committee members too, but we're just volunteers. They got to really make a concerted effort, and if it takes 5 years for this to change, you can't start 5 years from now. It's got to start right now. And one of the other graphs, you've maps that you've shown, Central Mass, and it's not just yourself, it's the entire Central Massachusetts corridor. That's a big voting block.
Yep.
And there's got to be a message that there's life outside of 495. And it can't be just the superintendent, it can't be one person. It's got to be all of those in concert. Somehow, the whole effort's got to be orchestrated, and you really got to pound away. Otherwise, it's not going to change at all. Because this is, and you know, next time you present it, you can make remarks, and I can make your presentation, because this is the 5th time that I've seen it. But every time I hear it, I get drawn in. But I also get drawn back that the town of Paxton can't afford the amount that's being passed on to us, which is attributed in large part because of the flawed formula. But we can't just say, oh, it's a flawed formula, you know, let's cut police and fire and DPW, and let's not, you know, buy badly needed equipment here. It's got to help everybody, and again, the disappointing thing is that it's been mentioned forever, ad nauseum. Tonight's got to be the night, and I hope when you go to the other towns, I don't know which ones you've already been to.
You're number one.
Try to get that same support. I would end with, I heard everything you said about excess and deficiency, E&D. In fact, you went from 200,000 to 500,000 in one of your iterations. And that moved the Paxton percentage down by 0.5 point. So my point, and I just would encourage you, your E&D is like our free cash. And we put all of our free cash into our operating budget. I'm not suggesting that you do the same thing, but I would ask you to find a way whether or not you need $2 million in free cash, or whether or not you only need $1 million and another $1 million can come to the towns, which would reduce Paxton's by 1.5 more percentage points. I'm just, you know, in sales, you got to make the ask 3 times. This is my 3rd time. To see whether or not there can be even further movement. I'm happy to see the movement that you did, and I think it took place maybe Monday night or otherwise, and thank you for that. But if there's anything more, I know you need reserves, but, you know, maybe you bank on keeping $1 million, and then the reserve is built up by going to the $75 per student to the $104, as opposed to maybe we might get it later. I'd rather we get it and maybe you get it later. I think that would go a long way.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do.
So-
Maybe we'll get it later. If we don't, you're getting it anyway by giving E&D. And Mark, I am gonna just say, so let me just give you a recap of how my last 3 years, or how I've solved out 23, 24, and here we are, 25 is, in 23, we had to use 950,000 in E&D to get out of 23, and on 6/28 of 23. I had that shortfall. Then in 24, I'd be running budget reports right now to show to our business and finance subcommittee, and I'd be $2.5 million going, oh my God, I'm $2.5 million short right now. Where can I get this out of? I've got this, circuit breaker. We were literally using our circuit breaker reimbursement as it's coming in the door, which is a reimbursement program. $2 million in my picture is still an A+. Like, I'm at night, like, that's being less 2%. Like, we just don't have any reserves at all. So for me to go to $1 million, I don't know that I could sleep at night. I don't know where I could find the money. I don't think you would want me to try to sleep at night. And I really, honestly, leaving $2 million in E&D and maybe getting to the point, can we get through this year and see like, okay, I think we got the budget right-sided, where I know that we've got stuff covered. Like, we're on par this year. I'm actually, I think the last report, was it like $123,000 to the good? I've never seen that before. So, and we still have the rest of the year to go. I hope that I can still remain in the good and not have to worry about where am I gonna rob from a revolving fund or a grant or wherever, not rob, but like figure out how to cover a budget shortfall. I'd rather get through a year without a budget shortfall and get some sleep at night and have E&D next year when we're still in hold harmless and we still have no money and be able to help you next year. But if we deplete those savings, I'm budgeting this year with the expectation of no accumulation of E&D. I really am.
Okay, so I don't want to belabor the issue, but I'm not saying deplete it. I'm just saying keep $1 million and put another $1 million into the budget. That's all. And if you can't, that's okay, but I've made the ask. So, I mean, we'd like to have $500,000 in our stabilization funds and not put it in the budget, but we're having to do it. So we're just asking you to reconsider it. If you can't, that's perfectly fine. And the other thing is the back and forth shouldn't take away. The presentations that you make are always outstanding. They're very thorough. They're very thoughtful. They're well thought out. We appreciate all the information, but we got a budget on our end that we've got to try to balance as well. So don't take it personal.
Nope, not at all, and totally understand,
Don't
and
intend it that way.
and
Do our job on our end.
absolutely, we take it that way, and honestly, we want to make sure the town of Paxton knows that we appreciate the support. And we know we passed the school budget last year, and it did have a huge impact on the towns, and so I think we just want to acknowledge we appreciate the support. We know the town values its schools. My first experience is a special town meeting in Paxton, I think 2 weeks after I started as superintendent, because citizens had gotten together because they wanted to make sure there was a security system in the school. And so I know people care. I know they're investing in the well-being of the kids, and I want to state as well, Mark, that we appreciate it. We do.
Anybody else?
No comment.
No questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you both,
Very
and-
much, very full.
We appreciate it. Well done.
Well done.
I think I've talked to you 10 times.
There a motion to adjourn finance.
So moved.
Any discussion? We got to do it by roll call, I think, Tony?
Yes. Aye. Yes.
Jeff?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Mark, aye. Seth? Ben?
They might be, I think that's.
We have a majority, a quorum, we stand adjourned.
That's it, yeah, we got 4.
Yeah, so
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All in favor, Carol?
Aye.
I'll vote aye, and I assume that Kirk is also voting aye.
Yeah, it's nice, but it's not.
Adjourn. We stand adjourned.
Kirk, can you hear us?